You have never worn a uniform that changed who you are, or maybe you have, and you just didn't notice. Think about the last time you put on a name tag, a badge, a lanyard with a title on it. Did you feel slightly different? Taller, maybe, more certain. The real answer to why is far stranger than you think. In the summer of 1971, a psychologist at Stanford University turned a basement into a prison. He wasn't studying prisons. He was studying you. His name was Philip Zimbardo. He took a group of ordinary college students, healthy, average, screened for good mental health, and split them randomly into two groups: guards, prisoners. No history of violence, no criminal record, no difference between them except a coin flip. Within 6 days, the experiment had to be shut down. Guards who had never raised a hand to anyone began humiliating the prisoners for entertainment. They forced push-ups. They took away blankets. They woke prisoners at random hours just to remind them who held the keys. One guard began speaking in a southern accent, mimicking a character from a prison movie, as if his real voice wasn't cruel enough for the part he'd been handed. The prisoners broke down. One had to be released after 36 hours, sobbing uncontrollably. Others became passive, hollow, obedient in a way that unsettled even the researchers watching. Here's the part that should bother you. These were not bad people. Zimbardo himself, the man running the study, admitted he got swept into the role of prison superintendent so completely that he stopped seeing it as an experiment. He started seeing it as a real prison. He had to be talked out of it by his own girlfriend, another psychologist, who walked into the basement and asked him what he was doing to those boys. So what happened? Why did a costume and a title turn calm students into something else? Your brain is not built to evaluate morality in a vacuum. It is built to read context. And when the context screams, "This is normal here," you conform to it faster than you'd like to admit. Psychologists call this de-individuation. Decoded simply, it means this. When your identity gets buried under a role, a uniform, a crowd, or a title, the part of your brain responsible for self-monitoring quiets down. You stop asking, "Is this me?" and start asking, "Is this what's expected here?" This isn't just a Stanford story. 10 years earlier, another psychologist ran a different experiment that reached the same unsettling conclusion from another angle. Stanley Milgram wanted to understand how ordinary German citizens participated in the Holocaust. Could obedience alone explain it? So he built a fake shock generator and told volunteers they were helping test memory and learning. A man in a lab coat, an authority figure, instructed them to deliver increasingly painful electric shocks to another participant every time that person got an answer wrong. The shocks weren't real. The screams were an actor. But the volunteers didn't know that. 65% of them delivered what they believed was a lethal 450-volt shock to another human being, not because they wanted to hurt anyone, because a man in a lab coat told them to continue, and something in their brain calculated that following the authority in the room mattered more than trusting their own gut. Question: is that you? Would you have stopped? Almost everyone says yes, they would have stopped. Almost everyone is wrong. That's the terrifying part. Milgram's volunteers weren't monsters. They were teachers, engineers, postal workers, people exactly like the ones sitting near you right now. There's a third piece to this puzzle, and it comes from summer camp. In 1954, researcher Muzaffer Sharif took two groups of ordinary 11-year-old boys to a camp in Oklahoma and split them apart before they even knew the other group existed. Within days, each group had built its own flag, its own slang, its own sense of us. When the two groups finally met, they didn't need to be taught to hate each other. They built it themselves, almost instantly, just from the fact of being divided into separate teams. Sharif called it realistic conflict theory. Decoded, it means competition over resources, or even the mere existence of an other group, is enough to manufacture hostility that feels completely natural to the people inside it. Put these three together, and a pattern emerges. Give a person a role. Give that role legitimacy from someone in charge. Give them a group to belong to, and another group to define themselves against. You now have the exact recipe that turned Stanford students into guards who forgot their own names by day 3. Here's the twist that should really unsettle you. None of this required evil people. It required ordinary brains doing exactly what they evolved to do. For most of human history, survival depended on group cohesion. Bands of early humans that could quickly assign roles, follow a leader without hesitation, and distinguish us from them were the bands that outlasted the ones who couldn't. The soldier who questioned every order in the middle of a hunt got the group killed. The person who couldn't tell friend from threat in half a second didn't pass on their genes. Obedience wasn't a flaw. It was a survival tool forged over hundreds of thousands of years, long before anyone imagined it could be pointed at a fake prison basement or a shock generator switch. Your brain still runs that ancient software. It just doesn't know the stakes have changed. Look around at your own life, and you'll start noticing the ghosts of Zimbardo's basement everywhere. The office where everyone quietly goes along with a bad decision because the person suggesting it has a bigger title. The group chat where one person makes a cruel joke and 3 other people pile on. Not because they're cruel, but because the room has already decided cruelty is the mode tonight. The uniform, literal or invisible, that makes you act slightly less like yourself and slightly more like the role you've been handed. You've felt it. Maybe at a new job, where you followed a rule that made no sense simply because everyone else did. Maybe online, where a username and a crowd made you say something you'd never say to a person's face. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human, running code that was written for a world of tribes and predators, not offices and comment sections. The real danger isn't that this instinct exists. The danger is not knowing it's there. Zimbardo himself spent the rest of his career trying to answer one question. If ordinary people can be pushed into cruelty this easily, can they also be trained to resist it? His later research pointed to something almost embarrassingly simple. The people who resisted, in his study and in Milgram's, weren't the ones with the strongest morals on paper. They were the ones who had practiced, even briefly, imagining themselves saying no in a specific moment. Rehearsal mattered more than conviction. So here's a question worth sitting with the next time you feel a room, a job, or a crowd quietly asking you to become someone slightly different than who you are at home, alone, with no one watching. Would you have stopped? You have never worn a uniform that changed who you are. Or maybe, every single day, you already have.